You realize my voice is grating, but like.
All right, call this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks for all coming tonight. Will the clerk please take attendance?
All council members are present, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Item 3, the approval of the agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Please call the city roll. Or please call the roll.
Avery.
Aye.
Dorn. Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Stecker.
Aye.
Chisholmer. Wendell.
Aye.
All right. Now, item 4, open forum. In order to provide equal access to all during the open forum and public comment portions of the meeting, each individual offering comments shall not exceed the allotted 3-minute period. The podium light turns green to yellow where there is 1 minute remaining. Your time for comment is expired when the podium light turns red. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the council on an item that's not listed on tonight's agenda? Okay. We'll move on. Item 5, presentation, South Dakota Open Meetings Laws Review. Bonnie Foster, our city clerk, will present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and council members, this is required with the new Senate Bill 74 that was passed in the past legislative session. So this is a review of the South Dakota open meeting laws, and this has been corrected so it pertains to you as a board member, a member of the governing body. This brochure, I do have copies if you would like to take a paper one with you, but this presentation is based off of this. This is a brochure that the South Dakota Attorney General's office has devised and updated this year. It is also focusing on the state law, chapter 1-25. So what are South Dakota open meeting laws? These are basically laws intended to encourage public participation in government. Official meetings of public bodies are to be public and advance notice of such meetings are to be given. An official meeting, as stated here, is defined as any meeting as a quorum of a public body where official business or public policy is discussed or decided. So you'll see under official meetings definition is the word quorum. A quorum is more than 1/2 of the seated board members. A vacancy is not included in that quorum count. So for city council, your quorum is 4. If you look at the bottom of the slide in front of you, teleconference has been defined. That was one of the changes they added this year. So a teleconference is a meeting or communication via any electronic medium. So that's your email, your social media accounts, your texting, Zooms, or conference calls. So as a board member, I would highly encourage you to be aware how many people are in your group text. If you're sending an email or you're having a conference call, how many people are on that call? We have to be aware of those things because that would have the perception of a unpublicized meeting where the media was excluded as well as the public. So just kind of an awareness as you're sitting on a governing body. If you're using email, I highly encourage you just to use the BCC. That's that blind carbon copy line on your email headers. What happens is, if you do that for any number of people, a person either responds to one or responds to all, the message will only go to the sender. It will not go to anybody else listed on that BCC line. So just some of those things that we do have workarounds, little safety net, as you per se. There are 3 clarifications in law where it is not considered a public meeting. Attending a press conference is not considered a public meeting. Attending events hosted by other governmental entities, non-governmental entities. So an example of this would be like if you were attending a social gathering or a service group club meeting. And then notice of quorum, I think as council members, you're aware that when you get an invite that you're all attended to, we automatically post a notice of quorum. What that is, it states that a quorum of the city council may be present at this event from this date, at this time, at this location. But then we disclose that there's going to be no action taken by the board members at this event.
Lonnie, just a question. That second one, events hosted by a non-governmental entity, quite frequently when we are at different events, we'll still put a thing in the paper that we might be more than 4 of us there.
We do. For city
It
council,
wouldn't be
we catch
necessary,
those.
Apparently,
Yep.
according to that.
It's
We were just
not-
all at the ribbon cutting for Ivy
Yep.
Center, so that,
It's not a requirement, but we do try to catch those in the sake of transparency for the public. So they can't say, hey, you didn't do this, but now we can say, well, state law says we don't need to, but that is our habit now, so we will continue to do those things as long as we're made aware that they're happening.
Is that new?
Yes, the fact that it is not considered, that is new. Meeting notifications, as a board member, you really don't have to worry about that because you have amazing city staff that takes care of meeting those posting deadlines and meeting room availabilities. The thing that I want to let you know, because it comes up all the time, if we have a special or a unscheduled meeting, one that just pops up on our calendars because there's an issue at hand, we will do our best to try to get that posted and meet open meeting law requirements. But we really could post it really short if we needed to. It provides us those abilities. And it's always good to know, as a council member, people are like, can I get a copy of this handout or this support document that was in your packet? Yes, once we post those agendas, that support documentation is a public document. And the public can ask for those and we will provide those. Now, news media, state law says that media sources are supposed to tell us that they want to receive things. Well, in Brookings, I'm proud to say that we go one step further and we just provide it to all of the news media sources that we have available to our citizens. So right now we're doing the Collegian, we're doing Brookings Radio, we're doing Brookings Register, and we're still reaching out to the Volga Tribune with those items. Every now and then I do get a question about, well, why wasn't this board's agenda published in the paper? Please know that agendas are not paid legals, and the newspapers fit them in if they have space. So that's why you will see some, but maybe not all. Now, if that is something that the council is near and dear, we can certainly have a future conversation surrounding those and turn those into paid legals, but that would be your decision. Proposed agendas are what's posted where we meet that 24-hour deadline as stated in state law. So what that means is the agenda as it's proposed is a fluid document. That fluid document can be amended, items can be removed, agenda items can be modified up until the mayor or the board chair calls that meeting to order and the board takes action to approve the agenda, declaring it final. We don't have a problem doing this. We will have a problem if it becomes a regularly occurring occurrence. Public comment period. This is required for all regularly scheduled meetings. So like with the city council, we put out a calendar which has all of your meetings for the entire year on it. We consider those meetings on that calendar regularly scheduled, and every one of those meetings will have an open comment or public comment period on those agendas. The only time that we would not be required to have that is if it's a special meeting, those things of nature, whether it's an inauguration, a meeting just for executive session, a presentation or an annual report, swearing in of elected officials, those sorts of things. Recording meetings, this has become a really heavy topic that's been discussed a lot most recently. Yes, a member of the public can sit in the room, turn their phone on, record the meeting. They don't have to tell you that they're doing it, but we do ask the public if they are, that they are reasonable about it, they're obvious, and they're not disruptive. If you're gonna do it, just be out there doing it. Hold your phone up, that's just fine. The only time that they would not be able to, of course, is if a meeting is a closed meeting where we go into executive session. Those are not recordable.
And Bonnie, is it just to allow recording, or are we required to record audio or visual of our meetings ourselves?
We, as first-class cities, if available, should have an audio recording. Video is optional, but most first-class cities we have these wonderful systems that we use, these agenda management systems. So we have both audio and video available.
I do like that we go above and beyond what we're mandated to. I was just wanting to confirm that.
You're welcome. The only time, of course, we don't record meetings is if we're in closed meetings or we have executive session. And of course, state law outlines 6 reasons why we can go into those closed meetings or executive sessions. But there is actually one additional one, which is located in Chapter 9, and this is for economic development matters. Just wanted to bring your attention that we have several options, and of course, every time we think about going into an executive session or closed meeting, we will consult the city attorney to make sure that they support that as well. So this concludes my presentation. There is way more to South Dakota open meeting laws, but it doesn't overly pertain to you as a board member because a lot of those requirements are covered by your staff. So, and with that, I will conclude and take any questions you may have.
Thanks, Bonnie. Is there any public comment on this item? Council, any questions, comments? Councilmember Tilton.
I would just say, obviously, this meeting of needing to discuss it at one of our meetings is new, but our awareness of a lot of these statutes is not. I just want to commend the staff for making sure that all of us are well educated on open meeting laws, because I think, as we do communicate offline, we are always making sure that there's not more than 3 of us in a text message thread or an email thread or meeting to discuss anything. And so just want to thank our staff for making sure we've always been aware of all of these. I think this is great to cover in public sessions like this so the public can be more aware as well. But for us, I think, aside from the new things, a lot of this will just be business as usual.
Okay. Move on to the next item. Discussion on House Bill 1130, permissible election dates for municipalities. Bonnie Foster will also handle this one.
Mayor and council members, we do have 2 school board members, Deborah DeBates and Wesley Cheddar, and we do have County Commissioner Dave Miller attending as well. We wanted to be able to have an environment where we can have some discussion back and forth between the elected bodies if we so choose. So with that, we'll begin. So the first slide here is what we're familiar with. Our council members serve 3-year terms. We're on a 3-2-2 election rotation. Our elections have been held annually in April of every year, and our elections have also been combined annually with the Brookings School Board. House Bill 1130, which is...
Do you want to just maybe explain what 322 means? I think most of us
Oh, sure. So 322 means we will have 2 council members come up every year. The third one in the 1-year rotation there is the mayor's seat. So the first 3 is the mayor and 2 council members, then we'll have 2 council members the succeeding year and 2 council members the year after that. So House Bill 1130 is effective January 1st, 2026, and the City Council is tasked with identifying what the new election date is going to be by January 14th of 2026. The Council does have 2 options as stated in state law for this election date. It'll be the first Tuesday after the first Monday in June, or the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So the dates, if you want to look at calendars, those dates would be either June 2nd or November 3rd. So now municipalities are not obligated to match their date with other local entities such as school boards or counties. The only legal requirement is to choose a date that the City Council wishes to hold their elections on. So at this time, what we know is that the Brookings County Finance Office has a preference for the city to select the November election date, and that the Brookings School District at one point in time earlier this year, had a preference to select the June as their election date, and that was purely because it coincides really well with their July 1st term start dates. Now, that's not tying them to any sort of thing here. I'm just sharing of information that I knew at one point in time. First-class cities in the state of South Dakota, there were 9 of us that had April election dates. What I know at this time is 3 of them have chosen an election date. So we have the city of Sioux Falls and the city of Madison, which have selected June, and then we have the city of Yankton, which has chosen November. There are 3 cities that do not have 2026 elections because they have 4-year terms. So 26 is their off year. And then there are 4 if you include us, that have not yet selected a date for 2026. State statute added a new section with this House bill, section 913-41, and that extends the current elected officials' terms until the new election date, and that where a office holder or a candidate has been duly elected and qualified. So for city council members, state code identifies that elected officials are to be sworn in at the first meeting of the month following the election. So what that means, if you were to select June 2nd, your council would be then appointed that first meeting in July. If you chose November, council would be sworn in that first meeting in December. Council members up for re-election in 2026 are Lisa Hager and Brianna Dorn.
Bonnie, can you remind me, in our charter, does it state when our terms start? And I guess what I'm getting at is, with this state law change, are we going to need to update our city charter?
No, the charter only states that the council has 3-year terms. It does not identify that where they start on this date. So our charter was really good about that.
And are we just operating because our terms will go longer than that no matter the outcome of the election? Are we just saying that will be a flex year kind of, since we won't be at exactly 3 years, we will go over no matter what?
We will go over no matter what. Yep. So then if you go with the June 2026 election, everybody's term is going to shift, and then it'll be June the next year. So we're just going to have to make those exceptions. Either it's going to be a little bit longer or a lot longer.
Do we have to address that in any way, since technically that is different from our city charter? Is it just administratively we understand that? Or
It's
is there any-
administratively understood by that state statute. That gives us that power
Okay.
to make that flex. Great question. What we don't know, of course, is a lot of the administrative protocols around our elections. House Bill 1130 states several things, but it doesn't tell us other things that we desire to know, such as, vacancy notices. When do we publish them? How long do they stay published for? Petition carrying deadlines. It gave us some guidelines, but there's some things that have to be interpreted. We still don't have a clarification on, when do we absentee vote? When does that start? When does that stop? Because when you think about state and federal elections, they have a 45-day window for early absentee voting. Municipalities and schools, in our chapter, we only have 15 days. So we don't know what that's going to look like. So there's a lot of the administrative side of elections that is yet to be decided and determined what that intent is. And there's also verbiage buried in this House bill, and it says in conjunction with. We need to decipher what that means. So I know, like, the Secretary of State's office, South Dakota Municipal League, and then the state associations for both the county commissions as well as the school boards are meeting, and they're talking about this. Their next meeting is going to be early October. Their first meeting was yesterday, and we haven't learned a whole lot from that meeting yet, but as that information is available, we will certainly share it with you. Looking at some election data, I think it's important to know how our elections have looked in the past. On average, for a city election, we had around 2,500 voters. And that came from a voter registration of around 12,000, give or take. Election costs for a combined election was right around $21,000. If it was a city-owned election, it was maybe $2,000 less. And that was just because we would operate with 3 vote centers instead of 4, if it was a city-only election. So with potentially combining the city elections onto a state and federal election date, we're gonna have to work through a partnership with the Brookings County Finance Office. And we hope that, the school board, we hope that we would be able to continue that mutual agreement between the 3 entities, the city, the school district, and the county. We do expect with a partnership to see an increase in election costs. We do know that the county has identified their 2026 budget for elections as $215,400. But what percentage of that is the cities or the schools, we do not know. We know that would cover 2 elections, but we do not know how that covers the other school districts in the county and the other smaller communities in the county. So as we know more,
Can I ask a question? Voter turnout, is it similar if the election's in June or November? Are the numbers still the same or similar?
let's
You
see.
get a better turnout?
Next slide, I can show you some of that.
Okay.
So, yeah. So when you look at, this is data from Brookings County Finance Office. The top box shows you the June elections in 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024. And the bottom box shows you those same years for the November election. So you'll see the number of ballots cast, the number of registered voters at that time, and the percentage voter turnout. So it's obvious to see that June has a smaller turnout than what November does.
That's interesting.
It's good data to look at.
Yes.
Bonnie, is it accurate to say, though, that sometimes in the June election cycle, not all voters are even eligible to vote?
Correct. June, if you're thinking partisan, yes. Republicans are normally the ones that vote in June, and independents and Democrats normally don't have any items on the June ballot. So those individuals are not knowledgeable about June voting. So, if a June election date was to be selected, we would have to do an election campaigning from the city, potentially with the school board, with the school as well, do some press releases, let people know what we're doing, what this means, those sorts of things.
Is there demographic data of the voter turnout? Like I think of in June, we have a lot of college students that go home and maybe don't vote
Right.
versus November. Have you noticed that there is a significant change in demographics of the votes?
I do not have that data with me, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I
No,
can
that's fine.
get back to you though.
Sure.
We can find that.
Bonnie, why are the registered voter numbers different on each one? 2018, shouldn't they be the same amount?
Well, they should be. I do not know why they're not. This data would have come from the county
And
finance
obviously,
office.
they took that count, maybe there's more people that registered to vote before November.
There's a chance that November has an uptick in voter registration numbers. So,
Because they're all greater than the June ones, so.
yes, I would take that would be what it is. There's a Tuesday in January, which we pull voter number counts, voter registration counts, and we use that number for the purpose of petition signatures. So if somebody wants to refer an item, they have to get 5% of the registered voters as of this Tuesday in January. Those numbers would be the same for the county, and we would pull them the same for the city or the school board as well on that date, but they will have some fluctuation as the year goes through.
Bonnie, as a follow-up to my earlier question, the voter turnout, is that voter turnout of all voters or of eligible voters?
It would be all voters.
All voters.
So you would take
All registered.
all registered voters, I'm sorry, yes, correct, all registered voters.
So while those numbers are quite low, many of them just simply are not eligible to vote in that.
Yeah. So when we think about both election dates, we have to think about some pros and cons, right? With what we know. So these two lists, I have one for June and I have one for November, has been compiled through conversations with other municipalities that are making these same decisions. So we all agree that in June, potentially a shorter ballot. Local candidates may be more prominent on that ballot, but we also understand that there could be an increase in the number of ballot styles. If you looked at your materials in your packet, there was a slide that said number of ballot styles for those last 4 years of federal elections. And you'll see that there's one year that stands out with like 15 ballot styles in June. That was because in 2020 we did that census. In 2021 was all the legislative districts redistricting. So there was a lot of people on that ballot. And therefore, depending on what your voter registration has you as, would tell you that you need this ballot. And they had all of these different ballot styles. So it was really challenging for the workers that year. We do understand as well that in June it would be a smaller voter turnout than what we would normally see in November. Voter confusion has been a topic, as far as when we talk about our independents and Democrats not being typically voting in June. Candidate forums, if they're held, they would be in May. May can be a busy time of year, whether it's graduations, Memorial Days, end of the school year, those sorts of things. And then just a reminder then that newly elected officials would be sworn in that first meeting in July.
Bonnie, how long is early voting prior to election day?
For the city, it has been 15 days.
So that wouldn't get the students.
That would not get the students in June. But if we are told that we have to do the 45 days as a federal and state, we would have that opportunity to grab some SDSU voters. But that needs to be determined. So then when we look at November, potentially a longer ballot, potentially more items on that ballot. The election date, very well known by members of the public, obviously has often had the highest voter turnout, but we will also have fewer ballot styles than what we would see in June. The local candidate costs for those candidates could be significantly higher as everybody's competing for the same ad space and the same airtime. And a local candidate may be challenged in getting their name out there, recognized a little bit better, or those sorts of things, because we all know that we see state, federal candidates and ballot question advertising really early. SDSU students, of course, in November would be in town. Candidate forums would be in October, so that's ahead of the holiday season. And then newly elected officials would be sworn in that first meeting in December.
Bonnie, both of these slides here talked about the length of the ballot. Do we have any data or indication of the number of individuals who follow through and vote on a longer ballot all the way through versus stopping maybe after the first few items? Is there any data on that?
I have seen some data, and then they talk about voter fatigue. And I think it's 30% of voters may never flip the ballot over and get to the back side. They get through 3 columns on the front, and it's race after race after race, and they're like, well, I'm done. It's right around that 30% of all voters may not.
And is there any kind of process or identification of when or where on the ballot certain items would fall? I know typically, like in presidential elections, it's usually president office first and then...
It's usually federal, state, and then local. So if with the local election, we do have concerns that we would be on the back side and at the very bottom.
Have you ever had it where we have more than just 2 sides and we have a third sheet?
No, but we had one ballot year that it was a 19-inch ballot instead of the standard 17. So rather than having an extra ballot, they make the ballots longer.
And it was easily counted no matter the length of the ballot.
Correct. The tabulator machine with the programming, they program it for the ballot length.
Do you know when they decide to do either side? Like, what is the criteria to deciding?
I don't know that. That would be a great question for the county finance office team.
Your voter turnout was county, right?
Was Brookings County.
Yeah.
Yep,
So the city turnout might be different for the city election. Overlap, but not entirely encompassing. And then the school district has another overlap, and that is it includes Aurora, but not anything else. But it does extend into Moody County.
correct.
So you have some really overlapping jurisdictions that each of these three entities don't necessarily coincide in terms of the boundaries, whatever, yeah.
Correct. So like I remember for the last election, I think we had 100 Moody County voters that voted within Brookings City for the school board election.
Right.
Yep.
And the voting location was in Brookings?
Yes. They would either have to come here to this building and vote early, or they would go to one of the vote centers on
Yeah,
election day.
that's how I remember, but I want to make sure, yeah.
Yep.
I think that may have changed in the last number of years, where there was a precinct voting now in Moody County, or wasn't it that way?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
But that, when we bring in the school district, the Brookings County Finance Office coordinates that with the auditor's office in Moody County. So I'm not involved in those decisions on how that's run, so I don't know that I understand the whole picture when it comes to the school board votes that come out of Moody County.
If you look at voter turnout within the city, the June percentages are less than half of what November is
for the city,
for the city,
the numbers we
but
have,
not for a county.
the numbers we have were for the county. Correct. Those are county numbers?
These are county numbers, correct?
Which is also less than.
So with that, that concludes my presentation. And so, like I said earlier, we brought forward, bringing you all to the same table so you can have some dialogue this evening. If you have any additional questions that you have of each other, or any additional questions you want us to research for you, let us know what you're thinking and what your needs are for information to make sure that you make the best decision for you and for the city of Brookings.
Thanks, Bonnie. Is there any questions, comments from the public? Council, questions, comments? Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. One, just tying back to slide 6 about the cost. You said to expect increase in cost. I was just wondering if you could give out a few more specifics about what does an increase in cost entail?
Well, my only, not knowing what portion of the city or school is the county's 2026 budget of $215,000, I really don't know what percentage cost that would increase, because I do not know the data that went into creating that dollar.
But is it like because we have more ballots to count, or like I'm wondering kind of what factors would play into that? Or maybe that's the same answer.
It could be ballot styles, because that cost would come back to us if we have more than 1 or 2 ballot styles. We normally have 2 for a combined city-school election. So it could be ballot styles. It could also be staff time for county staff. But beyond that, there wouldn't be much, maybe some tabulator programming costs, just because we would have some additional ballot styles.
Sure. And then another question that probably ties back to state guidance. I was wondering, since the legislature decided to change the timing for all of our towns to be either on the June or the November election, have they provided any guidance, or was there any consideration that you're aware of them also providing assistance or support around voter education or turnout efforts? Does that seem to be a big component of passing this bill? Or even guidance around public awareness that would be given to locals? How we talked about that we would need to increase our public awareness for voter confusion. I'm wondering if the state was involved in that conversation at all, and if they passed anything along to locals.
They They have not passed anything along to municipalities. Whether the State Association for School Boards or counties have, I do not know that either.
Councilmember Tildenberg?
I just wanted to maybe point out that the data we looked at in terms of voter turnout is for even number years, because that is when elections tend to take place during those timeframes. Our elections happen every year.
Correct.
And so there will be years when we have our elections on odd number years when other federal elections are not taking place. And so I would imagine we can expect an impact to that voter turnout in those years when there's not a federal election also taking place.
Correct. Yep.
And those would be run by you then?
Right, or we could enter in an agreement and for the sake of the voters, so it's the same process, whether it's an even numbered year or an odd numbered year. We could enter into an agreement and have the Brookings County Finance Office run the city and school board elections in those odd numbered years.
Because the school board also has elections every
Every
year,
year.
but the county does not, correct?
Correct.
Councilmember?
Bonnie, when you talk about the ballot styles, I understand how that could become cumbersome, in particular for the workers. But the number of ballot styles doesn't really change the voter experience, is that correct? They could still pick up their ballot at one stop at a poll. It would be just making sure they get the correct ballot style given their profile.
Correct, and that's because in Brookings County and the city of Brookings, we use vote centers. So our voters can vote anywhere. So every ballot style would be available at every vote center. Now, if we were at precincts, that would be a little bit different. We're hopefully not having to go back to precincts. We really enjoy the convenience for the voters with vote centers.
As a follow-up to that, I have heard scenarios where it might be that you walk into a single vote center, but you go to maybe this table for your federal election ballot and you go to this table for your local election ballot. Is that what we're anticipating will be the case?
Well, that's what we're anticipating, hoping to get a better determination of that term in conjunction with. Because that would give us that option to run a city and or school board election at a table at a same location that you have the federal and state election over here.
But we're not anticipating that all would just be on a single ballot.
We're not at this time, not making any assumptions as to what that means until we can get that language identified.
Councilmember Spector?
How big of an issue do you think bringing a council member on right after the budget for the following year has been adopted versus before the budget process? How big of an issue do you think that is? Or anyone? Because I think if you're a first-time council member, I'm not sure how much you understand what's going on during that budget process, the first year anyway.
So it's already been decided, so when you get done with your term or you run another term, every time somebody gets newly elected, they're gonna have that experience. But when they're done with their term, they've already had the experience to go through a whole budget process. And so they're able to make a better decision. I know there was a comment earlier today by one of the school board members. It's like, we get voted in April, and our first meeting, we're voting for some large items that we've had no input or discussion with. So I could see where November would be more advantageous for the school board, and I think November is, in my personal opinion, I think November is a better time to do this. There's better voter turnout. I really truly believe that November is a better deal. But that's my personal opinion. Councilmember Hager?
So just to piggyback off of that, I would agree that I think November is the best time to do this, especially given the fact that one of the major reasons for this bill was to increase voter turnout. And when everybody that we're talking about is holding nonpartisan office, we want to make sure that as many people as possible from all parties and independents can be voting. And considering that these are local entities, we want to make sure that our SDSU students will be able to participate as well. And I know we had a question about absentee voting period, but, you know, that would require some education to the students about, you know, before you leave, of course, in
During
April,
finals.
when it's very busy, you know, make sure you get your absentee, you know, ballot in. I think November just makes it easier for everyone to be conditioned to vote and whatnot. So, you know, I think that was kind of like my main point here. As far as one of the questions I had, or things I would like to know, is more about the petition deadlines, the petition carrying, because obviously reading through legislation is completely up my alley, given my day job. I was seeing a variety of different windows in here, and they overlap with the deadline to a certain extent, potentially, of us having to pick when our elections are. So it creates confusion as to, you know, does the clock kind of start once the election date is chosen? It's just not clear. So I would really be interested in that information, because it's just not clear from here. Like I said.
So, on that question, you know, I hope that, you know, with the tradition that we've had, both school board and city elections, that we can keep it nonpartisan. There's no requirement of putting party name or party affiliations if we go into either June or November,
So
correct?
that's one of the questions that we want clarified with the entities in peer, is as we are traditionally nonpartisan bodies, how is that gonna look on partisan ballots, other than it will be on both partisan ballots? Will we have to have those letters on there? That is a question that has to be determined by the governing bodies in peer.
I would think that would be our choice. I don't know why we would be able to have some outside entity tell us how we want to do our own election.
So
Rather than we didn't want any of this.
with that clarification, are you wondering just how we appear on the ballot, or also changing nonpartisanship of this position as well?
Well, right now, with school board and city, we are nonpartisan elections. So what that's gonna look like if we are on a federal ballot, that's what we need to have some guidance on. What is that gonna look like?
Councilmember Wendell?
I had a couple questions, and one of them I don't know that we know the answer to yet, but it's just something I'm thinking. It seems to me that this bill does need some cleanup, and likely there will be some legislation that might come in the coming session that will address some of these issues. The unfortunate thing for municipalities that select a June date is that even cleanup legislation that could come in the next session won't take effect until July 1st. And so I'm curious where these answers will come from for municipalities that pick a June election date, but cleanup won't take effect yet for them. So I am kind of curious about that. That's probably not our
Legislation could have that effective date written in it though. So it wouldn't, you know, it could be effective upon passage or upon signage. So there are some options that the legislators could take to enact that legislation prior to those June elections.
Do we have a sense of whether or not legislators understand the list of issues that these organizations are discussing right now, or that they've been?
I'm not aware of any. I haven't had any conversations. I did extend invitations to all three of ours, but they were unable to be here tonight.
Other question I had, which I don't want to put Devin West on the spot, but right now, if I remember correctly, your terms start July 1.
July 1.
Correct. And is that written into your documents, or would it
Term-
require a change?
Our terms are the first meeting after, regular meeting after the canvass. So the question is what's the statutory requirement when a canvass needs to take place? Because the canvass date is really the peg in which all this is driven off of. And for a school board, we have to have our effective date, or swear it in, so to speak, on the first regular meeting after the canvass date. And the canvass date, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's reasonable to expect it to be, has to be within 10 days or whatever. You know, this just comes up again with state constitutional amendments of when the canvass date is, at the statewide election, and things just take a, that answer your question, Nick?
I was kind of curious if you all had contemplated whether or not it would require any changes to your existing
I don't
governing
think so.
documents. If
Well,
perhaps
we
you
will
selected
just have to
different-
stick with what is statutory in terms of canvas and the first meeting after the canvas date, which now is a July meeting.
For
I know, but I'm not
municipalities-
sure I'm right on that. I'm not sure I'm right. We have our term, we have election in April, and the city has, you get your term right away. But the school board waits until July, and I'm not sure why that is, yeah.
For municipalities, our canvas must be held within 7 days. So when we have an election on Tuesday, we hold our canvas the following Tuesday.
So that's a good question, Nick, and I can't answer it. Of why it's July, first meeting to the following, you know?
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not
it's
sure.
been done that way, right? That's the answer.
Can I just add to that? So I had a conversation with another school board member who couldn't come here tonight, and she had mentioned something around a state, I can't remember the name, so I apologize, but it was like education authority or state authority of something that dictated that across the state, all school boards had to be in July. That's what she had believed. So I didn't know if you guys were aware of that or could explain a little
Not
bit
that,
more.
not that I'm aware of. You know, I think part of the reason July works well for us is when you look at the academic year. School starts in September, you know, so that board member comes on in July, we get things ready for school to start, approve the budget for that year, and so on. And so from that perspective, I think the July 1 date makes sense for us. And so a June election would be better for us. However, today, in conversation with the superintendent, she said it's possible that it would work for us to do it in November too. It's just an uncomfortable time for someone to come in the middle of an academic school year. I mean, voter turnout would be greater. One of the things we are concerned about is the increased cost, because we've already budgeted what we would spend on elections. And it wouldn't cover the amount that you were referring to, Bonnie.
Nick, weren't
Our share of that.
you kind of saying how coming in later kind of gets people up to speed with one of you? Wouldn't that also fit with the school board? That coming in at the beginning of the year in January, it's kind of like really busy in the beginning of the academic year, right? So you bring on someone new in January and then they can see that process before they have to start. Or is everything, when is
I
stuff?
was gonna say, yeah, when do you guys do your budget process, through the spring?
In the before school starts, yeah, in July and August. One of the things that I see as a concern from my perspective, the first year I came on the board, in August is when we have our Associated School Boards meeting. And they have training sessions for all the new board members. So that's where you really got the education as to what your role is gonna be and how you're gonna do things. So I don't know if the Associated School Boards has even thought about that. If the elections are held in November and a new board member comes on, how are they they would have to reconsider how they do that training for new board members, because I found that very beneficial. I know that our new board members did as well, because they review the things like the open meetings law and all those kinds of things.
So when Deb and I, we basically ended up going on the board for various cycles. I had a one-year appointment, as I filled out a term that hadn't expired. And our first meeting, we were voting on a bond issue and improvements for Mickelson Middle School, $18 million. And I've always thought, what was I supposed to do? Oh, no? I didn't know. I hadn't gotten into it, hadn't been part of the process. Meanwhile, for our budget process, we start our budget process months and months in advance. We have 2 presentations by our finance officer, business manager, with a vote then at the November, but we have to have a vote to set the levy by September. But typically, we have it in August.
See, that just to me sounds like it would make more sense to start later. Because you go in there, you don't know what you're voting on. You haven't been involved in any of that.
With the budget,
Yeah.
that's very true.
It's all a matter of opinion,
That's what's
conjecture, what it's all about. Most candidates kind of watch what's going on early on, they will come in with in my case, I was appointed, the meeting before, and and my first meeting was in August. I got sworn in about 2 minutes before she is.
Councilmember Wendell.
I'm gonna get a little seniority on her.
You also may not know the answer to this, Bonnie, but when you were looking at other first-class cities in South Dakota that are contemplating new dates, I noticed that Yankton set November, Madison and Sioux Falls have set June. Do you know whether or not their school districts were engaged in that conversation, or if their school districts have also set the same dates in those cities?
No, I don't, but I will tell you, in all of my conversations with all of the first-class cities, we have all talked about wanting to continue to partner with our school districts. So what that looks like, obviously, is individual.
And that is the custom in all these cities currently. They're running their municipal and their school district elections together.
I'm not 100% certain of that, but I know that they have all expressed concerns wanting to continue partnerships.
Which I would absolutely agree with. I hope we
Yeah.
can do that here. Vince, do you know whether or not Sioux Falls, Madison, or Yankton, their school districts set those dates?
I don't, I'd have to ask.
We can certainly find out though, and I can send that information to you.
And Dr. Schultz said to us today that she didn't know what the other school districts were doing yet at this point. She didn't know how many had made a decision.
Yeah.
Councilmember Tilton.
Going into the discussion tonight, it was the city's knowledge that the dates that have been considered as county in November, school board in June. Are the feelings amongst your bodies pretty set on those dates? Do you think that there's still time for contemplation on which are selected? And do you think that the decision that the city makes on when ours would take place, would that impact the decision process for county?
I think we still want to cooperate with the city and have our elections at the same time. I think that's probably the number one thing that we want to do. I think right now most are leaning toward doing the June, but I don't think they're closed-minded about it. I think they're open to discussion and open to thinking through some of the things. One of the things, as Bonnie went through, like the pros and cons, it is the fear that local elections will sort of get lost in the, if there's a federal election and a state election, those get a lot of attention. And will those local elections then get lost in the shuffle? That's one of the concerns I know that I have. But we haven't really spent a lot of time discussing this issue. Tonight was our opportunity to visit with you about it, and then we'll go back to our board members too. And I think Dr. Schultz was also trying to find data on what other districts were doing. And then West did voice our concern about Moody County, because we do have voters in Moody County that we have to consider as well.
And county's actually already in November, right? Did I misspeak there?
Yeah.
It's more just the partnership on how we run the elections that we have to
It's not been picked yet, but there's been discussion about that, and it would certainly like to work with the city on that. There hasn't been a lot of conversation about that. This is a starting point of what that looks like.
Okay, Councilmember Wendell.
I'm also thinking through, after Councilor Tilton mentioned the odd number years, and this isn't necessarily germane to us just setting a June versus November date. This is probably a topic for the council to consider after we do that, but I have a lot of concerns about just the shape of the electorate who's electing a couple of councilors whose terms happen to fall in an odd number election year versus councilors whose terms fall in an even number election year. You're talking about like thousands of different numbers of voters participating in those elections. I mean, we can do all we can attempt to do to get as many folks to the polls in odd number years as possible, but I do think we have to contemplate what that does to those terms. Right now, it's pretty equitable. We kind of have a similar turnout every year. But man, if we're thinking about some folks running in November of an even-numbered presidential election year, and then the following year, you've got the other two seats open in a November of an odd-numbered year, man, that's a very different sized electorate picking equitable positions on your council.
Councilmember Hager.
Going off of that, this gets back to some of what Nick said earlier in a comment, but section 12 of the bill appears to discuss the possibility that municipalities municipalities would sometimes hold elections in June, and sometimes hold them in November. I may be misreading this, and I wouldn't honestly recommend that anybody does that, because I think that just creates more voter confusion and causes a lot of problems with terms. But I do think for some of these municipalities who choose June, there's the potential to change, although there would obviously be repercussions. But this walks through, from my reading, of what would happen in those situations for folks with terms starting based on different elections.
That is one more clarification.
Right, like,
Yes.
but yeah. And then the other thing I was gonna add about the budget for the PowerPoint slide where it was talking about November and how newly elected officials for council would then be seated after the budget has been adopted. I think, again, that allows you to get up to speed on everything prior to the next budget cycle. But also realistically, if you're interested in running for a city council seat, you should likely be attending meetings ahead of time, participating in public comment and whatnot. Hopefully other educated voters are also participating in that. So hopefully when folks are getting on council, if they're new, they were participating in that process.
So Dave, I have a question. When we have national elections and state elections in November, every 2 years, does the county get any state or federal funding to run those elections?
I don't know that. As a newbie on this, that would be a question for Lori.
Just curious. Councilmember Dern.
Mayor, I just have a couple questions. Tying back to voter education, I mean, Councilmember Wendell brought up a really good point, but I think in general of just increasing the voter education from these entities would be important. I was wondering if I could hear from all entities, what efforts do you currently do for, that we have an election coming up, what is on the ballot, and just trying to increase that voter education, and maybe if you have any ideas moving forward too, whether in general you had it before, or especially with this change. Anyone, all three, if you could answer, that would be great.
So for municipal elections, we always put out a press release. We say like, here's the election date, here's a sample ballot, here's where the vote centers are located, here's the hours of the polls, all sorts of those things. We do run that twice, sometimes 3 times. If we feel that there's been a lot of chatter on social media, we'll throw it out there again to hopefully that the media will catch it and republicize it. We meet state requirements, but then we always try to go one better, right? Because we want our voters to be educated, we want them to know. When early absentee voting is going on, you might notice at this building, since this is where that takes place for all these elections, you know, we put different signage out on the building, we've got different things trying to grab the attention of those that are driving by. The city's PIO staff does a great job making posts on Facebook and Twitter and, you know, all of those locations. So we've really amped our game up with some of these things, having additional staff to carry those loads.
And in the past, we've been a part of that, so
Yeah.
that's the media presentations that we've had too. Other than our, you know, our candidates have always taken part in the forum, open forum that's held, and then the newspaper has always interviewed each candidate individually, and that's been posted. Now with the paper not published on a daily basis, that may be more limited, but that's been a way, another way for voters to become educated.
A very similar process for the county.
I was just wondering, just having a discussion about what is the burden of the candidate versus just that blanket voter education, that there's an election coming up, to try to turn out voter turnout from the entities themselves. I also had another question that I was just thinking through. My hope is that these positions and elections do stay nonpartisan, so I hope that this next question isn't mute after the first election, but when a position is nonpartisan, even if we stay nonpartisan and we go on a partisan ballot, I think of partisan funding or involvement or marketing. Bonnie, could you overview kind of what the guidelines are for candidates of like partisan funding and involvement? And do you know, would that be potentially part of the conversation with a partisan position, or has any other discussion around just finance laws or involvement happened as well?
So all of that would fall under South Dakota's campaign finance laws. So some of that has yet to be interpreted. You know, when it comes to PACs, those political action committees and stuff, there are guidelines of, you know, how much can be contributed, whether it's by an organization or an individual. There are some triple downs that go into the local elections, but I do not, and I have not looked at that to be well versed to answer that question tonight, but I can certainly get back to you on that.
Sure, yeah, I think it's potentially worth a larger conversation as well, because regardless, I think there is a very real impact of more partisan funding or involvement, and that can change the makeup of local elections and how decisions in our community are made. And so I would want to know what our local guardrails are and potentially authority around that, and a little bit more discussion with the state too, because this body needs to be in charge of taking care of our community. It should not get involved in partisan politics and being involved in a larger platform. It needs to be focused on Brookings.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Do we have I'm sorry if I missed this in the slide, do we have a deadline for when we need to make a decision?
January 14th is the last day that we have available to us to make that election decision.
It has to be on our agenda by
Has
then
to be,
or
yeah, so that
during
first
that
meeting
day.
in January, if we haven't done it before then, that's our last date, we need to do that, and then we will be out of compliance with state law if we do not meet that deadline. Please know that we can have more of these study sessions to have all governing bodies at the same table for these discussions. So if you are interested in scheduling another one, please reach out to City Manager Paul Brazino, myself, Mayor Niemeyer, and we will certainly work with scheduling and get another one of these scheduled. We have a lot of questions. There's going to be hopefully early mid-October. We'll get some more of these things, details provided from those legislative bodies and peer, so we can continue to make the best decision for Brookings.
I would appreciate maybe having another one of these sessions, especially joint like this. I know that for tonight, we had, as you mentioned, Bonnie, we had invited the local elected officials that are at the state level of government that sort of set this bill into motion, and then we also invited some of the staff from the county to participate in order to help clarify some of those budget numbers, but they weren't able to make it tonight. If we're able to have them attend, I think it would help provide a little more insight to some of the questions that we had, and maybe even if the public has any questions, that could be helpful as well. So if we have that opportunity to host another one of these, especially maybe, you know, a few weeks down the line, once all of us have kind of sat with this information for a while, and maybe invite those members to participate next time, I think that could be helpful.
So maybe a study session date in October, or the last meeting of October maybe, might be a good fit. I'll start those conversations and see if we can find a date and time.
All right. Wes, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, could you send this slide out to Dr. Schultz, and then she'll share it with our board members?
I sure
There's
will.
some things, I took some notes, but you know, all that is,
All right.
I just have one other thing. I agree with Councilmember Stoltenberg on having a joint session. I know that we all have meetings at different times too, and so I just would want it to be a consideration to have all people available to come, especially from the other entities. It's okay if it's not just added onto a city council meeting, but if we have a separate time, date, and location that can work for the majority, because I do find value in that comprehensive discussion. And I just want to thank you and your staff for working through this change, especially with little guidance that you have received. I know that can be really challenging and frustrating, so I appreciate you navigating and already having public discussions about this.
You're welcome.
I also thank you for that too. It's enlightening for us, and obviously we've created more questions, and we don't have all the answers anyway, but it's a good first round. So, we are having a regular meeting next week on the 23rd. Some of the items on there is temporary alcohol and a consent agenda. We've got student association report. We also have a presentation of food scrap recycling. And then we have one bid award to do for second phase of shared use path on the 20th. Obviously, we have a couple of second readings, and then public hearing on an alcohol transfer. Another one, flower shop, new owners for medical cannabis.
Yes.
We have a transfer on that. then, with that being said, is there any other items that the council would like to have for a future agenda item? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.